again. Man, I haven't been live since the fights, actually. And I haven't made a video since the fights of UFC 317. Well, now UFC 317 has a new star in Ilya Tapora. Now, what exactly does that mean for the company? Well, that just means that the company moves on. It has a new star. As new stars left, new stars are arriving. So in other words, John Jones leaves, Conor McGregor is nowhere to be found, has a lot of problems going on behind the scenes, still has that situation going on with Nikita Hand, and God knows what other situations are out there. Big Ank says, hello, how are you, Big Ank? Jake Paul ranked number 14 in WBC, correct. That's a little surprising. I'm going to tell you why. Believe it or not, I thought they might have ranked him higher. Not because I think that he deserves it, primarily because of the fact that, well, he doesn't, right? It's more like, all right, you know what? We're going to rank you all the way up here so we can justify a title shot. Now, if rank number 14 is enough to get him a title shot against Jai Apataya or anybody else who is the top cruiserweight champion, well, then I guess that's what it is. I'm doing great, my friend. How you been? Very good, man. Very good. Just had a lot of great fun for the fights. It was a great night of fights. I had a great time. Just like a lot of people had a great time. I had, you know, not to take a break, because obviously I never really take breaks, because if I'm not doing a podcast, I'm doing other things in life. But yeah, for the podcast wise, yeah, been taking not a break, but you know, not something that I would do, right? You know, I figured, you know what, there's a thing called burnout, right? I didn't want to burn out, right? I could have made videos after I did another live stream on top of a live stream covering UFC 317, but I figured, you know what, I want to be able to come in here, do it as fresh as possible, but hopefully, you know, it still keeps me in the algorithm nonetheless, right? But on any regard, what we're going to talk about today is a very serious topic in the world of MMA, right? Because the world of MMA right now is booming, okay? It is booming, but that is only booming for one side, and that one side is none other than the UFC. Big Ank MMA says the prelims on UFC 317 were really good main cards, and it delivered. 30 CJ Best says, is this Hermoid treatment channel? No, it is not. This is an MMA channel. So what I would suggest you do is act right, act correct, or I'm going to ban you from this channel and you're not going to be able to enjoy the engagements that we have going on. So please engage in a proper manner, or I'm kicking you up out of here. Big Ank MMA says, I'm hyped for UFC Nashville. That is the next fight coming up. While that fight is coming up, we're going to talk about other MMA events that are going on around the world. And I bet you a lot of you don't know other MMA events going on around the world, and that's primarily the point that I'm trying to make with this particular live stream, is that there are people out there that really don't care about anything other than the UFC. And you know what? The UFC has branded itself as the #1 brand in the world, and I think that's detrimental to the rest of the MMA space. So it's not that I think my son is playing jokes on me. Oh, okay, well, all right, shout out to you, 30 CJ Beast. Let me know what part of the world you are from, my man, and let me know if you had hit the like and subscribe button so that I could introduce you to everyone in the chat and welcome you into the squad. So shout out to you and everybody else in here. So, all right, the other topic that we wanted to talk about, isn't there a PFL coming up? For sure, you would know that because you're a hardcore MMA fan, Big Ank. But if you're not a hardcore MMA guy, you know, that's not something you would know. But not necessarily so much to talk about. I'm from Anchorage, Alaska. Shout out to you from Anchorage, Alaska. I got a homeboy who's a fighter, pro fighter, that comes out of Alaska. His name is Jarrell Askew. I don't know if you know of him or heard of him, but yeah, he's an Alaska guy. He's came out here and trained at Team Alpha Male in Sacramento, where I'm from. So, yeah, man, shout out to Alaska. Very beautiful part of the United States. Fun fact, a lot of people don't know it used to not be the United States. It used to be owned by Russia, but now it's an American territory, but that's neither here or there. Okay, so yeah, just woke up actually, so got after I just woke up, got here and got on the booth and just started going here. Sultan says number one from Russia. Shout out to you, my man. So we got Sultan from Russia, CJ Beast USA, so which is in Alaska, so quite close in proximity with each other. Okay, so the other element that I wanted to talk about, the other part of this live stream is the what do you call it? The racial elements of boxing. Okay, now this is very important to understand going into the Canelo fight. Yo Slow says, sup, man, how are you? Now look, Canelo and Crawford have been very, this is my neighbor's, I get a clock radio he cannot afford. Okay, very interesting there. All right, Yoho says, number one, I'm good, bro. How are you? Very good, my man, very good. I'm glad that you are here right now, right? Because we're going to talk about Canelo and Crawford, the racial element of boxing, its history, UFC's rising, MMA collapsing, monopoly of the game, and I don't even know which one I'm going to start with. Maybe I'll just start with the UFC's MMA collapsing since I led with that one. Okay, so as you guys know, the UFC is a booming business, but MMA is collapsing around it, and the data is showing it, okay? Now, for decades, there have been this theory of peak oil-shaped global thinking that at some point oil production hits its ceiling, okay? After which supply enters an irreversible decline, okay? Now, oil doesn't seem to disappear, but it becomes harder and more expensive and less profitable as you extract it. For example, expansion halts, efficiency tightens, and growth ends, right? Like with most products. Now, it's time to ask a similar question about another global commodity, which is mixed martial arts, okay? So after 2 decades of booming growth, it appears that we may have reached the peak of MMA. All right? Now, not in the sense that fights are over, but the era of explosive frontier, the expansion behind us, right? Yael Paris says, hi, how are you, man? Let me know what part of the world you are from, and please hit the like and subscribe button so that I can welcome you to the squad. So I just want everybody to know that inspired from the John Nash article on Yahoo Sports, right? MMA is not dying, but the growth is at its curve. I am Mexican. All right. Are you from Mexico by any chance? Shout outs to Mexico and all my Mexican supporters out there. Much love for all you guys. So, yes, MMA isn't dying, but the growth is at its curve, okay? The global number of professional MMA fights is decreasing. So there's not a lot of MMA fights going on right now, right? Reason being is because it's very difficult to get the shows going. Also, during the pandemic, that was also, a prevalent thing. If you guys remember, right? A lot of leagues were not able to survive, right? The feeder leagues. Now, look, let's take a look at the number of professional fights that are decreasing, right? Let me give you a graph, okay? So this graph right here goes from 2009s to 10s, okay, then to 16s. Wow, there's a lot of, global fights going on. This is basically all the fights. Now look at 2020 right there. There's a huge dip from 2020. Okay, with all the MMA fights that are going on around the world. Now, you look at the data of 2025, there have been only 13,636 fights, whereas the peak of it in 2016, 17, 18, wow, look at this, right? They had about almost 20,000 fights around the world, okay, but it declined. Now, you're probably wondering, why does it matter that other organizations are declining their fights? Well, guess what? If these fights are not going about around the world, then guess what's going to happen? You're going to have a decrease of professional fights going on, you're going to have less talent pool to pull from. In other words, the recruitment is going to be stale. And then on top of that, it explains why the heavyweight division today is not really rocking like that. You know, you hear a lot of people saying, well, there's not a lot of heavyweights out there. Yael says, I'm going to sub to you. Thank you, my man. Thank you. Hit the sub button right now so that I can welcome you to the club. Everybody around the world, welcome Yael Para as we continue on with this live stream talking about why the UFC is booming, but mixed martial arts overall is collapsing around it. So this particular data is pulled from the Tapology page, which is dedicated to tracking every single mixed martial arts bout that takes place around the world, literally every single one. And they were kind enough to provide these particular numbers of MMA bouts held globally as by each nation since 2008, right? So thanks to their data, okay, we can see that the number of professional bouts peaked in 2017, which was a lot, right? So the talent pool that they were able to pull from around the world was very vast. If you remember, that was during the time and the era when they had already recruited Darren Till. So the number decreased slightly over the next 2 years before it fell off in the cliff in 2020 thanks to the COVID pandemic and the economic closures that went on with it. And it quickly started to rebound through 2021. Okay, after the world's economies began opening up, the industry never fully recovered. Okay, so COVID has a lot to do with this. Instead, the second peak in the MMA bouts petered out in 2023 at 18,096 fights. The number of matches since decreased, falling into 16,808 in 2024, and the current stage at just over 13,000. Okay. As troublesome as that trend might be, it becomes even more so when we zoom on individual nations. Okay, now you zoom in on individual nations. Let me show you. Yutolo says 13K seems a lot until you factor in that is the entire world, and it's not that much. No, it is not that much if you really think about it. This is why the global expansion and all of that, the global expansion of recruiting has gone down. C23 says the quality of boxing matches has dipped significantly as well. Prelims of main pay-per-view cards have no names. The past few boxing events I've seen were pretty lackluster to say the least. All right, so shout out to C23. I'm going to pin that comment right there. And by the way, just to let all the subscribers know and all the listeners know, if you give a good comment, I'm going to pin it and I'm going to elaborate on it. So obviously the other subject matter that we're talking about is boxing as well. So I think that is an important, particular message to point out there. Yael Para says, bye. Okay, so have a great time, my man. I hope I will see you again soon. So, okay, let's take a look at the chart for countries around the world, right? So this is USA, Brazil, Russia, and Japan. Now, why is it that it's important to take a look at USA, Russia, Brazil, and Japan? Well, at some point, MMA was only USA, Brazil, maybe a few Russians, and Japan, and that was about it, right? So this is basically their their chart right here, right? So the decline of each country. Obviously, USA always has most of the fights around the world. Russia is sort of up there, but Brazil has quite a good amount of fights as well. Japan is right down there, has always been a staple of MMA. But yeah, so the United States is the long backbone of MMA, right? As seen by the sharp decline in activity. Now, in 2009, more than 6,000 professional fights took place across the country. This could be pinnacle for American MMA contests by 2024, that the number has dropped just over 3,000 by a 52% decrease. Now, Brazil and Russia, historically, the sport's second largest markets, tell the same story. Brazil peaked in 2013 with 3,800 bouts. By 2024, it hosted just about 2,000 fights, and Russia hits its all-time high with 3,000 fights and now only sees 1,782 fights annually. And that's probably because many of the Russian men are out to war, and that could be a factor as well, right? Now, other English-speaking strongholds like Canada, United Kingdom, and Australia each have a key piece of MMA's global expansion strategy, right? You have Jack Della Maddalena as a champion. You had Australia's and New Zealand's own, Israel Adesanya, right? Who else? Obviously, Volkanovski. But on any regard, yeah, Robert Whittaker, right? The four. So there's four. There's four people in that part of the world, oceanic champions. But each has a key of MMA's global expansion strategy. Have also experienced a steep contraction. Now, combine these three nations that went from 1,941 fights in 2011 to just 885 24 in 2024. Now, these are not marginal territories. They're pillars of the sport. And when they falter, it signals something deeper than cycle variance. It's structural. Now, what's going on? Back in 2011, at the height of MMA's early boom, okay, if you remember 2011, that literally was the biggest boom out there, right? Longtime sports researcher Rich Luker expressed doubts about the sport's long-term trajectory. Luker, who specialized in trend analysis and polling, noted that MMA had become a staple among young men, estimating that about 30 million Americans aged 12 and up consider themselves avid fans of the UFC or MMA more broadly. But he cautioned that the sport might be riding a wave of curiosity, comparing it to short-lived phenomena like televised poker and professional bull riding. Okay, now his concern wasn't that MMA lacked appeal. Okay, it was the novelty that might be driving more of its success than staying power. And what do I mean by this? Perhaps Luker was onto something, okay? The decrease in each of these markets could be a result of fans moving on as a novelty of MMA had worn off. Now, what do I mean by novelty? That could mean a whole wide range of things, right? Obviously, in the old days, it was bare knuckle, it was bloody, it was sort of like, how do I say this? Featured as a no rules type of competition. So that's the novelty behind it, right? It kind of wore off after a while. You needed personalities like Conor McGregor to sort of carry the sport. But again, going back to the oil exportation, right? Much like oil exportation, MMA boom was driven by new countries, new stars, new markets, but the growth was not, may have not been inherently sustainable. It relied on untapped regions and novel demands, and once the expansion frontier closed, the industry didn't evolve. You know what it did? It contracted. So what you're seeing now may not be a temporary post-pandemic slump. The collapse of regional markets suggests that global MMA was less an endless growth machine and more one-time land rush. But there is another possibility that explains the downward trend in the industry. Okay, so the UFC, I'm telling you right now, has never been richer. Okay, since its blockbuster ESPN deal back in 2019, if you remember, it opened up with TJ Dillashaw, training partner of mine, along with Henry Cejudo. Okay, it has surfed wave after wave of success. Broadcast visibilities exploded, pay-per-views surged, although have since cooled down domestically, okay? So global reach expanded. The UFC has never had more fans nor attracted more viewers around the world. Never has it made much money as it does now, and has never been as profitable as it is now, okay? Excluding some of the one-time legal fees that they got going on with, let's say, the fighters union and those people that are trying to fight them for it, the class action lawsuit they had going on. So, okay, so to the casual observer, the sport looks healthy, but the monopolies can grow even as the markets they dominate shrink. Now, the UFC argues that its increasing output improves the sport is thriving, but the plaintiff is ongoing in an antitrust lawsuit, as I was telling you about the opposite, okay? Zuffa suppressed the industry wide output by acquiring rivals, locking down fighters with restrictive contracts, hoarding talent, not using them, but to prevent others from doing so. So, you know, the former CEO of the UFC, Lorenzo Fertitta, bluntly wrote to Dana White in 2014. He texted him, and the UFC needed to keep taking these fuckers oxygen till they tap out. So that's what he said to Dana White, right? The rivals were the efforts that he's talking about, the oxygen access to top-level fighters, as he was saying it metaphorically. So if one looks around at the competitive landscape in MMA, it sure looks like Fertitta succeeded in what he was looking to do, right? Bellator, once considered the strongest domestic alternative, was acquired by the PFL in 2023 after years of stagnation. But instead of the rising, the merged company is releasing its top fighters and struggling to gain traction with live gates, ESPN viewership, and media relevance. ONE FC, once touted as Asia's answer to the UFC. Okay, it is reported scaling back its MMA efforts entirely, pivoting towards regional Muay Thai events in Thailand as a financial pressure mounts. How about Invicta FC, right? An all-women's promotion that was once fed talent to the UFC now operates on a shrunken event schedule with diminished media profile and unclear long-term stability. So the results, the MMA industry, where the UFC remains stronger than ever, but increasingly alone, as a regional MMA proves incapable of surviving in the shadows of MMA. Okay, the one exception to this seems to be Japan. Okay, so this part talks about Japanese exceptionalism in MMA. All right, let's get to that. While the rest of the MMA world surged back and shrank, Japan remained relatively steady because Japan has always been a staple of MMA. The question is why? Japanese MMA is more culturally rooted, more insular, and more independent from UFC's global consolidation, meaning that MMA is less likely to be a fad and that UFC's brand of MMA provides less direct competition to Japan's promoters. So in other words, the way that you see Premier League in England, the way that you see NFL in America, the way that you see rugby in Australia, or maybe even in other English-speaking countries, right? Or hockey in Canada. MMA is part of Japan like that, right? I think it is literally like their national sport. I know they delve themselves into other sports, but MMA is a big factor right next to professional wrestling. So what does peak MMA really mean? Okay? It doesn't mean that the UFC is in trouble, quite the opposite. It's likely to grow even stronger, but the sport around it seems to be getting weaker. The number of fights is down, the number of viable promotions is down, and perhaps most importantly, the number of opportunities for fighters is shrinking. Fewer events means fewer paid fights, fewer chances to get noticed, fewer paths to the top, and less talent in the cage. It also means more dependence on the UFC. So in other words, the UFC is trying to take over not only the big stage, but the little stage of the feeder leagues that we are talking about. So fewer events means fewer fighters getting paid, fewer chances to get noticed, fewer paths to the top, and less talent in the cage also means more dependence to the UFC, okay? This is not just the top fighters. You will see less competition for their services, meaning fewer options outside of the UFC, but this dependency will also likely extend to the entry-level fighters where UFC Fight Pass connected promotions and Contender Series will have a bigger share of fights that used to be held on regional scenes. Okay, so although who knows, maybe we just luck out and find a new untapped source, and any thoughts of peak MMA can be put off for a few more years. So that's what you got right there, right? With, so obviously right now, Ilia Topuria and Merab, you know, are the two biggest stars in MMA right now, at least currently, right? But is Ilia Topuria and Merab really a star, right? Like, it doesn't feel like something of like significance with the win that Ilia Topuria had going on, right? It doesn't feel highly significant. I don't know why. It doesn't have that same feeling. Now, look, during that event, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted. Everybody that was locked in on that event really looked at Ilia Topuria as the next big thing, right? But what about the outside world? Well, I don't know. Maybe in Spain, Ilia Topuria is going to garner a certain attention. I know that he's met with the prime minister of Spain. He's met with their leaders. He's met with a lot of celebrities. He's endorsed by Real Madrid, which, by the way, is a very big brand. But I don't know if that will translate in America. But who knows? Maybe it will translate well in other places, right? But let's see here. Okay, so I'm gonna look at Canelo versus Crawford. Okay, how about this? Robert Garcia exposes the truth behind Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford. Let's hear what Robert Garcia had to say about this real quick. Let me...
They ain't on my level.
I fought everybody.
The last fight that you fought since
Everybody.
2002.
Mention me one. You mention me one elite fighter. Just one. Everybody.
You.
Oh, me.
No.
It's gonna be me.
I don't
And
care
you
about
will.
anybody else.
And you will see that.
You. So when I beat you, is you gonna be a nobody? When I step a mud hole in your ass, is you gonna be a nobody?
Marty Miller, shout out to you, my man. Shout out to you. Shout out to you, my man.
Every last one of them.
Oh, wow.
Step a mud
Okay.
hole in their ass and he gonna be next. Watch. Live, only on.
All right, so there it is, right? Threatens Canelo, saying that, you know what, you're disrespecting my resume, but you're going to be the biggest name on my list, and what, after I beat you, are you going to be a nobody? All right, let's hear what Robert Garcia has to say, the truth behind Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford. World-renowned trainer Robert Garcia. Let's hear what he has to say here.
And Crawford versus Canelo. Out of all of the big matches that people know about, which one are you looking forward to the most?
Well, without counting obviously fights that I'm involved, I would probably say Crawford versus Canelo, because it's a fight that most of the people don't give Crawford a chance because of the size, but he's got skills, man. He's got skills. He's got good speed, good footwork. That's why I do give him a chance.
You do give.
I do give Crawford a chance, of course. You know, Canelo's last few fights, you know, he does his work. He gets work done, but.
Now, look, let me preface this a little bit, right? Why I'm playing Robert Garcia. So he's giving Terence Crawford a chance. Okay, Robert Garcia is a Mexican trainer, right? World-renowned Mexican-American trainer. Has trained his, I believe, brother Mikey Garcia, right? Mikey Garcia went on to the world levels, had a very great boxing career nonetheless. But what I'm saying is that trust and believe, there are going to be people that are going to get at Robert Garcia and say, well, how can you not support a Mexican boxer or this and that? AR says, hi, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. How are you? You know everything about UFC, boxing, and life. Like, comment, share, subscribe. You need to have your own TV show. You need to be on the big scene. YNWA. What is YNWA? Let me know what that means. Thank you so much, my man. I'm going to pin that comment right there. Shout out to you, AR. So, okay, let me know what that means, what YNWA means. Okay, so, yes, a lot of people are going to get at Robert Garcia. He's supposed to be Mexican. He's supposed to support a Mexican guy. Same thing with Crawford. There's going to be a lot of black people that are going to say that Canelo Alvarez is going to win. But guess what? all those same black people are going to be criticized by other black people saying, well, how come you didn't support Terrence Crawford and all of that, right? There's a racial element in boxing, especially You Will Never Walk Alone. Oh, okay, okay. Shout out to you, my man. Hey, are you from England, Liverpool, by any chance? You Will Never Walk Alone is usually a phrase that people in Liverpool FC say. So if you're from Liverpool, England, or the UK, let me know. Or maybe that's just an expression that you often use. But I know it's an expression often used by that of Liverpool FC. By the way, a brand that supports and sponsors Paddy Pimblett, interestingly enough. So when Paddy and Ilia Topuria fight, it's literally like Real Madrid versus Liverpool. I know Liverpool is right up there in the Premier League right now. I don't know where Real Madrid is in the Spanish league, but nonetheless, they've always been an elite team either way. So yeah, that's the racial element that goes on with boxing, right? And this black and brown thing has always been an issue, right? For example, there's a stereotype that they call black fighters runners, right? Well, because a lot of black fighters like to fight very slick, use a lot of range, use a lot of, footwork, footwork heavy, good rhythm, right? This is usually the stereotype of most African-American boxers, whereas with Mexican boxers, their whole thing is fighting Mexican style, up close range and body shots and whatnot. So Marty Miller says, I think they should do Gaethje versus Paddy and Arman versus Topuria. Well, you know what, man? That sounds like the best competitive architecture possible, right? But the demand for a fight that has beef, that has history behind it. By the way, I'm going to make a video. I haven't made videos in almost a couple of days now, but I am going to start pumping up videos all throughout this week, right? And one of the videos I'm going to pump out is the history of Ilia Topuria and Paddy Pimblett, the beef that they have going on, right? So in other words, what I'm going to talk about in there is also going to consist of, let's say, when they fought or when they got online at each other, how Ilia Topuria was talking trash to Paddy, how Paddy was talking trash to Ilia Topuria, saying that, you know what, this is the reason why the Russians got terrorized. This is why the Russians terrorized the Georgians. As you know, the Russians have been going to war with the Georgians for quite some time. Okay, and even as far back as 2014, 2010, 2018, and whatnot. And, Paddy made fun of the situation to get at Ilia Topuria. So there's a lot of racial elements going on in that, too. I mean, obviously, these are both white men, right? White men from two different parts of the world, two different cultures. But nonetheless, they're white men, and it does ring a bit of a racial, tribal, and, me versus you, my people versus you type of thing. Very similar to what you're going to see with Canelo and Crawford. Now, you're not going to see a lot of that with Crawford and Canelo themselves, right? They're both consummate professionals. They're both in here to win. They're both in here to become the best in their generation, and that's really all there is to it. But with their fans, you got to understand, there's a lot of black people that support Terrence Crawford. There's a lot of Mexicans that support Canelo. And right now, with the LA riots that is going on, you better believe that there is a racial element that is going to be used in there. Did you know that there's a lot of black Americans that did not support this riot going on with the Mexicans? You want to know why? Well, you take a look at the gang culture that is going on inside California, right? That alone just tells you that, hey, you know what? There's going to be a lot of black people that are not going to support this. They're like, hell no, we ain't going to go out there and riot with y'all. You know what I mean? That's the attitude on it, right? Why? Like, their attitude is, why would they go out and help the Mexicans? Now, it's not to say that there aren't black people that are helping in this riot, because there certainly are. But their politics leans towards social justice, racial equality, and things of that nature, not necessarily gang banging and this and that, right? Marty Miller says, you're right, Topuria versus Paddy is the biggest fight, but you do it by merit. It should be Gaethje versus Paddy. Arman should get the title shot. Well, And then Marty Miller has a laughing emoji sign. I think he's laughing at me doing an impression of black folks not keen on helping the Mexicans in a riot, right? I mean, that's the overall. I know this for a fact because I got black homies that, you know, will say this behind closed doors, right? Not necessarily say it in a public setting or in YouTube or anything like that, but behind the scenes, listen, I know a lot of black homies that do feel that way and sort of bleed over that same sentiment into this fight with Crawford and Canelo. But yeah, you're right, Marty Miller. It should be about merit. However, the UFC is predicated on business, money, and what is good for the goose is good for the gander, as they say.
Never does that little extra to please or to. He knows he doesn't need to anymore, so he's just comfortable enough with just securing the win. He became a businessman, and I think that could be something in favor of Crawford. That if he comes out at his best and good forward, you know, Canelo is flat-footed. He you know, his last fight, especially against the run.
See, there you go, right? Flat-footed. Oftentimes, one of the biggest criticisms that they have towards Mexican fighters is, you know, the flat-footedness, yeah, that comes with that. But yeah, you know, I mean, you have to be flat-footed to sit down on your shots, right? So that has something to that. So
he was throwing one punch at a time. Didn't even try to be aggressive and get him into the ropes. Throw combinations of 4 or 5 punches. He never even tried that. So I think at this stage, I am giving Crawford a big chance of maybe pulling it out.
We all know Crawford has amazing skill and ability. We saw what he did to Earl Spence. We've seen his career and everything. As you stated, Canelo, he's been kind of lackluster as of late. Do you think Crawford has the skill enough to bring out the best in Canelo at the same time while Crawford is having the best fight of his night as well?
I think that's why it's one of the fights that I'm really looking forward to, because yes, that's a possibility too. If Crawford, you know, starts, you know, with his speed and footwork and landing 2-3 punches at a time, which I think he will, I think that's going to bring the best out of Canelo too, to go out there and show the world that I know. You know?
So in other words, what Robert Garcia is saying is that the style that Crawford has going on, it will bring out the best out of Canelo. Okay, that's how he puts it, right? It's going to bring out the best out of Canelo because, you know what, the way that Terence Crawford switches his stances, the way that Terence Crawford can also fight in the inside as well as the outside, I think it's going to force Canelo to bring out his best. It's going to force Canelo to move his feet a little bit. It's going to force Canelo to punch a little harder, to punch a little faster, to use counters rather than just trying to fight him head on. It's a high-level fight, 2 high-level guys, and I don't expect anything less out of it.
You know, this small guy is not going to compete with me at this division, so I think it'll bring the best out of both. So that's why I really see it a great fight.
Let's talk even more about what's going on with that fight. It's going to be in the early afternoon, and it's going to be on Netflix. I don't even know if it's Netflix pay-per-view or anything. We've seen live events on Netflix.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's going to be in the afternoon because I believe it's battling a UFC card, and they don't want to go head up, so they're going to...
Okay, so now they're talking about how, yes, it is confirmed that it's going to be in the afternoon, right? And, well, it's because they don't want to compete with the UFC card, and what an insane conflict of interest. This is the reason why a lot of people are going at Dana White, but in reality, I mean, there is no competition because UFC Noche on that same day of September 13th, it's not the deepest card anyway. I mean, come on, man. You tell me what's a better card, right? Yair Rodriguez getting a title shot versus, by the way, undeserving, okay, versus a once-in-a-lifetime Terence Crawford versus Canelo. I don't know, bro. Like, you tell me what you like. Unless, of course, you're just an MMA guy and you only like MMA. But if you like boxing and MMA and you can, you know, look at 2 sports as equally entertaining, I think you would say that Canelo and Terence Crawford are the more entertaining fight over Volkanovski, okay, who's a paper champion because Ilia Topuria dropped his belt after beating his ass, okay, and then Yair Rodriguez, who's a paper contender, was only sent to fight there because he's the only Mexican in the card, and they haven't developed any real Mexican stars yet, right? This doesn't include Mexican-American stars with the likes of the Diaz brothers, Henry Cejudo, and anybody else who is Mexican-American, right? And key word of that is American, right? Not Mexican national, which, by the way, is a highly contested issue in the streets right now, if you know what I mean, considering with ICE and all of that. But anyways.
Put it a little earlier than they would normally.
Okay, so let's take a look at Robert Garcia's expression when he found out that this fight is taking place in the afternoon. Oh my goodness, it's taking place in the afternoon. No way. That's not boxing, Holmes. No way. You can't be doing that. No way. All right, anyways. Marty Miller says, did you know, okay, UFC cards have been lacking lately. Pay-per-view buys are way down too. Marty Miller says, did you know that Topuria only has 1 KO prior to coming to the UFC? All of his finishes were submission, which proves how well-rounded Ilia Topuria is, right? It proves how well-rounded he is. Probably much more well-rounded than Conor McGregor, although I will say Conor McGregor had better kicks, right? You look at the acrobatic movements of Conor McGregor in his earlier days. Man, it was amazing. I don't know why he steered away from that, right? He talks about, like, you know, being stuck in the mud and all of that, right? But in reality, you know, he's now the guy that's stuck in the mud. But Boba Fett says, Assalamu alaikum, brother. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Ahlan, welcome, Boba. Let me know what part of the world you are from, my man. As we continue on this second portion of the live stream where we talk about the racial elements of boxing.
So yeah, so that's what is going on.
It's an earlier show.
Yeah, it's going to be an earlier show. What are your thoughts on that? If that were to actually transpire?
I didn't know that, but it's on a Saturday, right?
Yes, Saturday the 13th.
Oh wow. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's gonna be interesting to see. You know, maybe he'll be fighting like at 4 or 5 p.m. Something
like that. Yeah.
Well, not bad, but you know, it's different.
Oh, we see the Saudi shows at like noon here.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so yeah, you know, it's Saturday. You know, people will travel. You know, instead of getting there at 8 to the main event, they're gonna have to get there at 6. You know, people do. You know, they always get there for the main event. In Vegas, people always show up to the main event only.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's right about that. In Vegas, people only show up to the main event, but nonetheless, yeah. Okay. Oh, what is?
So yeah, you know, it's Saturday. You know, people will travel. You know, instead of getting there at 8 to the main event, they're gonna have to get there at 6. You know, people do. You know, they always get there for the main event. In Vegas, people always show up to the main event only.
Yeah.
So people are they're gonna have more time to party after.
Now, that's a good point. He says that, hey, you know what? It's not a bad deal. They're going to have, you know, more time to party after. So that is the positive side of it. All right. So now I want to get to the racial elements of boxing. Obviously, I've been sort of elaborating on that a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on a little bit of a monologue, talk about the tribalism that comes in combat sports, not just in boxing, but more so in boxing, right? Okay. So yes, there's not a lot of racial element that goes on with this situation, right? There's not a lot of that going on. Okay, not with Terrence Crawford or Canelo, to say the least, but the history behind boxing you can't deny. You go back to Jack Johnson. I've told you this over and over again in my videos and in my live streams where I talk about that Jack Johnson at the time was this cocky black man beating all these white fighters, right? Dating all these white women and this and that, and really pissed off a certain segment of boxing fans. In today's modern climate, it's really no different than that. You see that in boxing as you've always done. You take a look at the internet space of boxing. It is full of people that have, you know, racial undertones behind it, right? Again, the same thing with MMA. There's a lot of that going on as well, especially with the Dagestani fighters, right? A lot of anti-Muslim sentiments that go on behind that. But guess what? I have a classic video that I want to play for you guys, right? A video that I made about almost 11 months ago regarding Ryan Garcia. It was almost 11 months ago, almost a year from this date, right? Where Ryan Garcia used the N-word. Okay, and by the way, it was a pretty big video of mine, one of my highest viewed videos. I'm going to replay it for you guys right now just to give you a context on what is going on. So there is a racial element going on in boxing, as it always has. There's a racial element going on in combat sports, as it always has been in MMA nowadays, especially with the Dagestani fighters and their success and the jealousy that comes with that, and also the fact that they beat a lot of your favorite fighters, right? You could say the same thing about black fighters as well, right? You see that a lot. But on any regard, what we're going to do is we're going to play this particular video with Ryan Garcia using the N-word. And by the way, I reacted to it on audio by a buddy of Ryan Garcia, a family friend of Ryan Garcia, whose name is Dubs, right? Dubs is a YouTuber. By the way, he went to prison for unaliving a man, but on a technicality, after he got convicted, after a few years, got released out of prison due to the, well, liberal laws that we have in California, right? But nonetheless, he's out, and that's really all there is to it. And now he's a big YouTuber making commentary on cultural subjects that deal with Mexicans, that deal with blacks, that deal with Los Angeles politics and everything in between. So I want you to keep that in mind as we talk about the racial elements that go on in the world of professional boxing. So here it goes. Affiliation with the Christian religion, right? I think that right now, Ryan Garcia is in a hot seat based on some recent comments that he had written on social media and then decided to delete it after. The exact words was, F the blacks and F the Muslims, and then deleted it. And as you could imagine, that would have gotten a serious backlash because obviously it did. He tried to erase it. Obviously, you can't just erase anything that you write on social media nowadays. People screenshot it, people download it, and not only that, people go out and spread it around the world. That is the unfortunate thing about it. I'm going to react to a video from a very respected member of the YouTube community, in particular the prison YouTube community. A little background on this gentleman. His name is Dubs. He was an OG gang member, right? He spent time in prison. Let me just say this. I know that a lot of people who know about his case and understand what he did may look at it and say, you know what? This guy right here, he's I don't even want to say it, right? Just the worst things. But look at it like this, from the point of view of your social contract and who you run with. Understand this, okay? When you're a Marine, when you're a Navy SEAL, when you're an Army Ranger, you have a social contract to the military, to the Constitution, and everything else. And this is no different with gangs. You are under a social contract to this particular hood, this particular barrio, and then you have ranks, structures, and orders just like the military. Now, obviously, it's not like the military, but you can't argue and say that there isn't any similarities in the structure. The only difference is one may look at it as more prestigious than the other. But either way, the reason why I wanted to react to his video regarding Ryan Garcia is because, number one, not only does he know Ryan Garcia, well, not know him personally, but knows his family, which is an important detail to point out in this particular video. But he also grew up in an era where there was racial tension amongst blacks and Mexicans in Southern California. And I think that this sort of explains in full detail where Ryan Garcia's mind would be at in a current moment of time, or how he was influenced by these particular rhetorics. Now, it is important to understand that not all California black folks have anything against Mexicans. In fact, there are some hoods and some gangs that are affiliated with Mexican gangs as a black gang and vice versa. But there are black gangs that do fight Mexican gangs, and that's just the reality of it. And as a result, people sort of develop this sense of me versus them attitude, okay, which is a common thing in tribalism. And keep in mind, that's literally what gangs are in the first place. They're just nothing more than tribes. You may look at it as ridiculous, you may look at it as useless, but it is a reality and a way of life. And unfortunately, if you grow up in Southern California, whether you're a gang member or not, racism is a reality. And it's crazy that for a place that has literally very few whites, it's pretty racist in terms of detention, but some say that it's getting better and some say that it's not. Let's react to this particular video right here. I'm going to put on the description below this particular video for you to see it in its full entirety in video, but for now we're going to do this in audio. So here's Dub Double S right here.
What's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to the channel.
New video.
So,
now usually he has a louder gun that he fires off in the sound, little audio that he has going on, but usually, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's a smaller gunshot because it's probably a very sad story that's going on right now, but let's continue on.
I don't know if this happened yesterday. I don't know when it happened, but I opened up my YouTube app and it's everywhere. Ryan Garcia allegedly going off on a racist rant. I don't know that it's right, but I'm gonna speak as if it is.
Now, so far, a lot of people have confirmed that it is Ryan. Obviously, there's a lot of fake accounts out there, right? Just people impersonating different celebrities or different people that are online. That does happen. This is not one of them.
I do want to say, first of all, that a couple of the podcasts that I saw that were talking about this issue, they were, one of them specifically said, we've known Ryan was racist for a long time. And
it's not so much that Ryan is racist, it's more like Ryan grew up in a neighborhood or grew up in a region where this is common. This is common. Now, once again, I said that not all Mexicans, whether they're gang affiliated or not, hates black people. It's not a reality. For some people, it varies. And then there's some that are affiliated with them. And then you also got to take into consideration there's the other aspects of Mexicans joining black gangs, but that's another story for another time.
They tied in Donald Trump and all this stuff and how Donald Trump...
And that's a good point because guess what? Donald Trump for sure is going to be used as a prop in this particular argument with Ryan Garcia saying exactly what he said, and that's the unfortunate thing about it.
Hates Mexicans, but here's this Mexican that hates blacks, and the word racism is thrown around so much. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds, but can handle. Racism is thrown around so much. Now,
racism, it definitely does get thrown around a lot these days, but yeah.
I'm not going to get into the weeds. I want to focus on the topic at hand. If this was Ryan, it was a hard ER. You know, I know these youngsters nowadays, for whatever reason, no matter what ethnicity, they're using that N-word.
So keep in mind, when Ryan tweeted F Muslims and F blacks, and F with the N word. He said it with the N word, by the way. He said it with a hard ER. So that's a little different. Okay? That's a little different than saying it as a term of endearment like, hey, what's up, my ninja, or this and that. Even me, I'll tell you this, right? Dubs is going to go into why he doesn't like the word. Me personally, obviously, I'm North African. Do I have a pass to say it? Yeah. Do I hang around black dudes that allow, let's say, other Asians and Samoans to say it? Yeah. But will I say it? No. But I will tell you what circumstances that I will say it, maybe to quote somebody. Okay, which unfortunately for Joe Rogan, he's gotten canceled before because that's literally what he did, was quote somebody and said the N-word with an ER. And even I won't do that. But if I'm quoting somebody saying it as a term of endearment, okay, maybe I'll say, okay, such and such said the following, and I quote. Okay, I'm going to put quotation marks even with my fingers or where I'm writing it. But if I'm writing it, I'll sometimes use a ninja emoji to convey my message, to make you understand, like, well, this is what I'm trying to say, or, but I'm not going to say it. Either way, there are people that don't like the word, and there are even Mexicans out here in California that check other Mexicans for saying the N-word. And I think Dubs is going to elaborate on this.
And for some reason, the black community has allowed for people to use it with the A on the end, as if that makes it better. That's cool. I'm old school. I don't believe that word should be used. I've been around. I've done time in prison with blacks that did not like blacks using the N-word. I think that's a better stance. I wish more black people were of that stance and mindset and would check their own people so that everyone would stop using that word.
Well, I agree with him for the most part. However, it is a cultural understanding, depending on who you are. I'll give you an example. You guys know the rapper Stupid Young, right? The Cambodian Asian boy Crip rapper down in Long Beach. He did the song Mando with Mozzie, and for all those that are hip-hop fans that are watching this, you're probably thinking, why are you repeating this? Well, because this is an MMA page, and they may not know what you know, or may not be tapped into what you're tapped in, so I have to give full detailed information in order to convey the context of the story. So, Stupid Young uses the N-word because he's an Asian boy and he's a Crip, right? He's an Asian boy Crip. Now, with the Asian boy Crips, the first word that you have to understand in that concept is Crip. It is a lineage from an African-American gang. Okay, so if you're part of the Crip set, whether you're an Asian Crip or whether you're a Crip from another race and you just happen to jump in the gang, more than likely the lineage that you're going to go back to is of African American heritage. There's no way around that. So they allow Stupid Young to say the N-word. Ebro from New York, who, by the way, sort of grows up in a different sort of politics of the racial dynamic of New York, he condemned Stupid Young. But the problem is, Stupid Young comes from a different culture in California, in Long Beach, to which that is tolerated and that is allowed. Now, you go to, let's say, socially conscious black cities like Atlanta, Chicago, maybe even in the Midwest or all over the southern states. They're not going to allow you to say that if you're a non-black, for the most part, and generally speaking.
This person, I didn't see the face. I don't know who's saying that, but they're attributing it to Ryan. And so if it was Ryan just got suspended. I'm sure he's angry, but you be angry at the individual. You know, there's people that are saying that the person that runs the lab has ties to Haney. You know, it is what it is, but you never target an entire ethnicity. You don't use racial slurs, period. The fact that you just got suspended, that's one thing, but to compound it by going after an entire ethnicity and using that word, that's it's game over, party over.
And Dubs is absolutely right about that, right? Because you cannot say these things just based on the beef that you have going on. Let me put some context into what Dubs is saying here. So Victor Conte is the president of VADA, which is the drug testing agency that literally put Ryan in hot waters because of the testing, and then some will argue that it's false testing or this and that. Even Dana White mentioned at a press conference after a fight, which by the way was non-related to Ryan Garcia or boxing or any kind of way, and he said, I feel like there's something tainted going on in that particular subject with the testing. And that's Dana White speaking from the outside. Now, what Dubs is saying here is you can't use an entire ethnicity as a way to target an individual. And I've had experiences where I've seen this in New Jersey. I'm telling you guys, I grew up with a lot of Italians in New Jersey. I grew up with a lot of black folks, obviously. And I grew up with different types of ethnicities, period. But one thing I noticed with Italian Americans, let's say if they got into it with black kids or they got into it with whatever infractions that was done upon them, let's say they got their house robbed and they knew that it was black folks that did it, they would immediately go out and use racial slurs straight away. And you know how Italians are. They're very emotional people. They get very loud and very aggressive when something doesn't go their way. And guess what? They're also known to have used racial slurs. But guess what? Here's another thing. That's done behind closed doors. The issue here is that you're doing it in a world platform with your social media. And even though you can delete it, which you did, people took screenshots of it already. And it's unfortunate for Ryan Garcia at this point.
I've had interactions with someone in Ryan's family. Really, really cool dude, man.
And this is the reason why I wanted to react to Dub's video, because of this information right here.
I've had interactions with someone in Ryan's family. Really, really cool dude, man. And I know he has to be just, I mean, I don't even know what to say about this because, like I said, I'm not trying to be an apologist for him. Anybody using racial slurs, I'm not with it.
And look, this is important to understand about Dubs, right? Obviously, he spent time in prison almost all of his life. He's now like 50 years old. He spent most of it in prison because of, well, how do I say this? Putting in work for his barrio, okay? That's the best way to put it. You can agree with that. You can disagree with that. It is what it is. But also, what is also a fact in California state prisons is that it's racially divided. So in other words, for someone like this brother right here that we're listening to right now, he had to roll with the Mexicans. He couldn't politic or function with black folks in prison due to the politics. Now, some may look at that as racist. Some can look at that as just a way of life, a way of survival, a way of just following the rules that is of a certain place. But it is interesting to understand that this is the stance that he's taking with the infractions and the transgressions that Ryan Garcia is committing.
In prison, I was told we don't do that. You know, if you want to disrespect somebody, you disrespect them with your hands. You don't do it with words. And whoever you're mad at.
Now look, some will argue and say that Mexicans in prison do use racial slurs against blacks. Some will argue that. But in Dub's account, he's saying that he doesn't do that, nor do the people that he's functioned with on the inside, and maybe even the people in the streets that he's ran with.
It has nothing to do with anyone else of that ethnicity. It has to do with that person. And you focus your energy at that person. And you would hope that a person that has an issue with somebody would be able to speak and communicate, if not eloquently, at least respectfully, and not resort to this stuff. This is childish stuff. This, you know, when I heard it, it reminded me of, I play Call of Duty, and it reminded me of how dudes go in there and they just throw the N-word around to try to inflame people.
And that's true. This is a common culture in Call of Duty and also in the world of GTA Online and maybe even UFC Online. This is just what they do. You are in the internet culture where people are safe at home, not in front of the hood, not in front of people that could really put it on them if they, let's say, said a racially derogatory statement. Right? That's just the culture of the internet, unfortunately. And to tie this into Ryan Garcia attracts a lot of people that are within that age demographics. It's important to know that. And attracting that certain demographics, this is just the type of behavior that they're going to engage in. And sometimes even you, as a big-time celebrity, are going to forget that I shouldn't be saying things like this because I'm not a normal person. I'm a person that has a worldwide platform that people can pick apart by the millions.
Or they think it's funny, or I don't know. It just sounds stupid. And when I heard this recording, I felt the same. This sounds stupid. What's the point? Hopefully, more comes out about this. But if it was him, it's not justified. If it wasn't him, then hopefully those that are calling him a racist will apologize.
Now, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt that there is a possibility that Ryan Garcia did not say this. The problem is that Ryan Garcia came out with an apology. He had an African-American woman with him posing. I don't know who she is. I don't know if she's a star or a rapper or just any random lady of the night, as they say. And then he goes and he says, I apologize, I love everybody. So it kind of hints at the point that, yes, Ryan Garcia did say this, and there's a certain remorse that he's expressing based on these transgressions that he's committed or has known to himself to have committed.
If it is Ryan, you can't apologize your way out of that. Not the way it was used in the phone call. Maybe I'll try to reach out to Ryan's family member and get an explanation, if there is one, that this person may not even.
So this part is very interesting, and I'm going to tell you why. Because Dubs, obviously, as he's mentioned, is family friends with Ryan Garcia. He's going to reach out to his family, talk to them, try to get an understanding of what is going on here. But the way that I interpret that, well, who cares what I think and how I interpret that? How a lot of people are going to interpret it, really, is that they're going to look at this and say something to the effect that, hey, you know what? Maybe he's just trying to create excuses for him. And here's the thing, right? That's normal. That's absolutely normal. Most people that you love, that you care about, that you will ride with till the sun comes down, you will make excuses for them. It's called selective politicking. Now, I'm not saying Dubs is doing that. I'm trying to tell you that this is just a natural human reaction to do. You want to give them the benefit of the doubt. You want to give them room to explain themselves if there's any explanation at all, as he has said it himself right here. But at the same time, I think Dubs is also in a realization that there is no defending this. And at some point, you have friends that say things that you just can't defend.
Want to discuss it. We've been seeing this meltdown for a while, the lead up to the fight. Prior to this Haney fight, Ryan was praising God and always talking about God. Like he had started talking about God and his religious beliefs, and then just in the lead up to the fight, it just things went completely sideways.
Now, here's the commentary that I want to make about Ryan Garcia and his so-called affiliation with a Christian religion, right? I think that a lot of that is just virtue signaling. Now, look, I know a lot of people who are Ryan Garcia fans are not going to like that. Maybe other people who support Ryan Garcia are not going to like me saying that, but this is the facts. And I'm going to tell you why I'm saying this and what I'm basing it out of. As you guys know, Khabib is known to be the most religious man in mixed martial arts, right? Including his whole entire team. I've had experience being around guys like that. They really do believe in what they are saying. Do I think Ryan Garcia is that guy? No, because the evidence says otherwise. Now, obviously, the Christian religion has a different rule on drinking, or does it? Does it have a different rule? Obviously, in Islam, you're not allowed to drink, you're not allowed to do or say certain things. So, by default, we're going to look like the more conservative and more, and the much more stronger practitioner of the religion than Christians themselves, who have very loose set of rules, right? At least in comparison to the Islamic religion. I think that's fair to say. So, my estimation is that I think Ryan Garcia was doing a lot of that for virtue signaling. Now, look, you could agree or disagree with that. That is just my personal opinion and my take on the matter. I think there's a certain level of virtue signaling that Ryan Garcia is exhibiting in order to gain a certain fan base. In particular, the conspiracy theorists, the MAGA people, the people that are into the QAnon conspiracies, and people that are hyper skeptical of the world, which, by the way, I am to a certain extent, but I also like to approach it in a very objective manner, in a matter-of-fact type of scenario, rather than going off of my emotions or emotional fallacies.
You know, we had this hotel room incident. I don't know what to believe. It was.
By the way, the hotel incident, I was down in the Beverly Hills and Los Angeles area when that happened. I urge you guys to check out some of my videos that I have of that situation. I have a few Ryan Garcia videos that sort of talks about that. Go check it out.
Alleged that ISIS built up to the fight. It's nothing. There's just because they say Haney can't sell a fight, right? So.
And that's the truth. I don't think Devin Haney is really the worst promoter, but at the same time, let's be honest, he's not a promoter like Ryan Garcia, at least not in the recent times in which we've seen Ryan Garcia just really turn up the way that he did in these recent times.
Ryan was trying to stir up controversy to sell the fight, but it's not. It hasn't stopped. And this right here, you cannot use racial slurs, man. And hopefully nobody's gonna try to justify and say, oh, it was a private conversation. You don't use those words even in private unless that's really.
Now this is where it gets really interesting, right? Look, private conversations, people do say a lot of things behind closed doors, and I've told you guys this, right? I've been around a lot of Italians in the East Coast that act one way in front of everybody because they own businesses, they own certain positions in certain companies and things of that nature. And guess what? There's a lot of things